our next slide, if I can get to it. Oops, there it is. Today, we're going to be talking about how to fund community resilience projects. This will be led in part by my colleague, Pamela Martinez. So she will be talking a little bit about our Climate Safe California program and how it relates to today's topic. I want to say a huge thank you to our webinar sponsors, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, River City Bank, Sunrun, Calpine Energy Solutions, RNA, MCE, SunPower, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Sonoma Clean Power, and Peninsula Clean Energy. Also want to give a thanks to our promotional partners who help to amplify our message and get you to our Zoom webinars. You can see their names here. I'm not going to read them all for time purposes, but thank you to our promotional partners. They're great folks. Also wanted to remind everyone that we are having our in-person event coming up next month. Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 in Sacramento will be our California Climate Policy Summit. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers, both for our plenary session in the morning and our breakout sessions in the afternoon. I want to thank you to our Policy Summit sponsors. You can see them at the bottom: Peninsula Clean Energy, San Jose Clean Energy, Ava Community Energy, and SunNova. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and go to events, and there will be a link to our Policy Summit registration page. We're also hosting a lobby day the following day on Wednesday, March 20th, and you'll also find information to sign up for that if you're interested in attending that, also in Sacramento. Here's today's agenda. We have me this morning, obviously introducing you all. Pamela will talk a little bit about our Climate Safe California campaign. We'll hear from Alex Turek from Grid Alternatives, Lori Pesante, who's a community advocate, Pamela again, and then Lauren Halili from the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice. Then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. If you do have any questions, you can put them in the folder that's down below on your screen under Q&A. You can also put them in the chat, but it's a little bit easier for us to manage if they're in the Q&A folder. And then we'll have an opportunity to take action relating to today's topic. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Pamela Martinez, who will talk about our Envisioning a Climate Safe California webinar series overall. Pamela?
Thank you, Geraldine, and good morning and afternoon to a lot of you. My name is Pamela Martinez. I'm the Community Energy Resilience Project Manager with the Climate Center. Next slide, please. So I'll go ahead and start with our vision. The Climate Center envisions a future where everyone in California benefits from equitable access to climate solutions, from clean air to renewable energy, healthy food, and more. Next slide. The Climate Safe California is the Climate Center's unique and comprehensive campaign to make California the first state in the nation to become carbon negative. Next slide. The guiding principles for Climate Safe California targets policies and programs that, 1, are based on the latest science, 2, ensure a just transition for fossil fuel workers, and 3, prioritize climate justice and equal access to climate solutions. Next slide. The Climate Safe California campaign has been endorsed by hundreds of businesses, elected officials, nonprofits, and more than 2,000 individuals. Next slide. The Climate Center's 2024 priorities include rapidly cutting greenhouse gas emissions, building a grid for the future, and scaling up natural carbon sequestration. So how does our webinar today tie into our Climate Safe California campaign and our vision for a future where everyone in California benefits from equitable access to climate solutions, clean air, renewable energy, healthy food, and more? Well, when we talk about community resilience, we are referring to a community's ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions and withstand, respond to, and recover rapidly from power disruptions and potentially other emergencies such as wildfires and extreme heat. As we know, a record amount of funding has become available through the state and federal funds, and one of our goals at the Climate Center through our Community Energy Resilience Initiative is to ensure these funds and projects prioritize frontline communities that suffer the most from air pollution and power outages. Today, our speakers will share insights and challenges around building clean energy projects, as well as resources to help us build more resilient communities. So with that said, I will pass it back to you, Geraldine.
Thank you, Pamela. And thank you everyone who has joined us. We're going to try to be mindful of everybody's time today. So we're going to get started with our first speaker, who is Alex Turek of Grid Alternatives. I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Geraldine, and good morning and afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining today. So good to see so much interest in the topic we'll be talking about, which is using clean energy technologies to provide resilience to communities and how to fund these types of projects. And the context that I'll be speaking about today is really pairing solar photovoltaics with battery energy storage systems to provide resilient power, specifically for at-risk populations such as seniors or medical baseline customers who really require consistent power sources, and making sure these folks receive that in kind of a future or even now of increased blackouts and brownouts and power outages. So let me share my screen. Okay, as mentioned, my name is Alex Turek. I'm the Director of Strategic Development here at Grid Alternatives. Grid is a nonprofit solar installer and job training organization across California, covering all of California, as well as Colorado, Washington, D.C., an international program that covers Puerto Rico, Nicaragua, Mexico, and Nepal. And really we're driven by a mission to use renewable energy to drive economic growth and environmental benefits in communities most impacted by underemployment, pollution, and climate change. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles and representing our Los Angeles office. And I'm sure folks from this region, as well as throughout California, know the environmental perils, pollution, freeways, we all know in Los Angeles, power plants, oil refineries, oil fields, two of the largest ports in the world, and one of the biggest port facilities in the world, and the transportation network that's built out around that with trucking. Needless to say, a lot of environmental justice hotspots and pollution sources that unfortunately specific communities deal with the majority of the brunt of. And really our mission here in Los Angeles is to ensure that these communities who face the consequences of kind of a fossil fuel economy, especially localized here in Los Angeles, are first to participate in kind of this clean energy transition that the state is undergoing. So our program includes a single family program, multifamily, affordable housing, nonprofit, mission-aligned nonprofits, and others. We're also a job training organization, training over 100 folks annually, specifically targeting at-risk individuals who face increased barriers to employment, opportunity youth aged 18 to 24, folks who have been justice involved. We have a Women in Solar program to try to get more women in construction jobs as well. And really, similar to our overall mission, we want to see this growing green economy equitable and making sure that it includes everyone. As I mentioned, our kind of flagship program for all of California is a no-cost solar program for income qualified homeowners. For no cost to them, they can save up to, since NEM 3, maybe 60 to 80% off their utility bills. And as these numbers show, we've served more than 3,500 families in the Los Angeles area alone and saved a collective $63 million in energy costs for these families. Also, as I mentioned, over 100 trainees per year, with the focus on, specifically historically overlooked populations and at-risk individuals. But today I want to talk about our Resiliency Center work. Obviously, as I mentioned, the effects of climate change include extreme heat records being broken, an increased frequency in power shutoffs, and really what happens to the folks who rely on dependable power, such as seniors or the medical baseline population that I mentioned before. And how we do that is pairing solar and battery storage at center to transform that resource center into kind of an emergency response center, particularly when the grid goes down. A case study, this is our first Solar and Storage Resiliency Center project, partnered with the Wilmington Senior Center. This is a 35 kilowatt solar and 40 kilowatt hour battery storage system. This is a relatively small system, located in Wilmington, home to a number of oil refineries, very close to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, really one of the most polluted neighborhoods in California. We were really drawn to this project because of the services that they provide the seniors. And like I mentioned, this being a focus for a vulnerable population that we want to see it have consistent power even during power outages. And we designed this system to provide power for medical equipment like dialysis machines, the refrigeration of medicine. So we're backing up a number of refrigerators. There's a couple mobile air conditioning. So the common area space during those periods of extreme heat can remain cool. And then also for lighting, cell phone charging, and other electronic charging. The next slide, I'm going to be getting into some of the funding sources for these projects. They weren't available when we developed this project, and so it relied pretty exclusively on philanthropic sources and grants that were awarded. A couple other projects we have in the pipeline included Tsuchi Medical Center, similarly backing up power for medical equipment that the community relies on, and the San Fernando Gardens, which is a HACLA, a housing authority of the city of Los Angeles, large community, over 700 residents, and a place where folks can come when the grid goes down and to access air conditioning, kind of in a similar vein as a cooling center. So what's been really exciting is we've entered kind of this next chapter of state investment for clean energy. We've done a really significant rate of adoption for solar PV over the last 7 to 10 years. And now the next chapter is investing in battery storage and pairing those two clean energy technologies to obviously improve the reliance of the grid, and be able to store that solar and then deploy it when the grid needs it most. So really a concerted effort by the state to invest in this battery storage technology. And what's really exciting is that there's a concerted effort to invest in the communities that grid works in, specifically for an equitable adoption of these technologies. So kind of the flagship rebate program that's soon to be passed and implemented is the next phase of the Self-Generation Incentive Program, or the SGIP program. This is for all investor-owned utility territories, and it includes a $280 million carve out for low-income residential homeowners to invest and leverage for solar and storage. We expect that, especially when combined with other programs, that this will offset the full cost of solar and storage. So it's really similar to our no-cost solar system, and we'll be able to layer on no-cost storage as well to income qualified homeowners. And in this case, that means folks at 80% area median income or less. There's also some specific grant programs, including community resilience centers from the Strategic Growth Council, who runs a number of equity programs and climate investment programs, including this one that totals $100 million for competitive grants to fund neighborhood level resiliency center projects. This started last year. I believe this year they'll open up kind of round 2 for that funding. There's also from the investor-owned utilities a microgrid incentive program. This is also a grant program totaling $200 million, forgot the M there, for microgrids in at-risk communities. And they define at-risk as those who are expected to face increased blackouts, whether due to wildfires or extreme heat. As part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's also been a huge expansion of the federal investment tax credit program, with a baseline tax credit of 30% to offset the total cost of the system, with a potential of 30% in adders for equitable programs. So depending on where these projects are located or who they benefit, you could potentially see up to 60% reduction in the total cost of these systems through the ITC. And what's exciting about this is that governments and nonprofits now qualify for direct pay. Before, you needed to be a taxable entity with a fairly large tax appetite to leverage the tax credit. But now, if you're a nonprofit or a government entity, you can receive direct payment in lieu of a tax credit. Other programs include, as also part of the Inflation Reduction Act, the EPA Solar for All program and Community Charge program, which is just about to begin accepting applications. These are kind of community level climate investments that can include an array of programs, including solar and storage. Also a shout out for Strategic Growth Council's Transformative Climate Communities, who's funded a number of these programs as well. For solar only, I mentioned our DAC/SASH program. This is for income qualified homeowners to receive no-cost solar from grid alternatives. There's also a $1 billion investment for deed-restricted affordable housing within the state of California in investor-owned utilities. So, you could potentially pair these solar programs with the solar and storage rebates. And in a lot of our cases, we're seeing no-cost solar and storage. So it's just a really exciting time for the state of California, and a really concerted effort to drive battery storage adoption. And that ends my segment. Feel free to contact me. I'll include this in the chat as well. And I'll hand it back over to Geraldine. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Alex. I know it was a lot of information in a short amount of time. We'll have lots of questions for you during the Q&A session. So thank you for that presentation. And I'm going to, as soon as Alex gets, there we go. Thank you, Alex. I am going to introduce our next speaker, who is Lori Pasante, a community advocate. And she's going to talk about, I believe, issues in the Central Valley. So Lori, please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. 2 years ago, if you'd have told me I'd be here talking about this, I'd have said no way, because I didn't do anything with resilience. I was just told to go to a meeting and I went. And so for those of you who are where I was 2 years ago, reduce your anxiety level, because sí se puede. So basically, I was asked when I was working for the Dolores Huerta Foundation here in the Central Valley to go to a meeting for what's called the LEAP program. And this is run through the Department of Energy at the federal level. And the LEAP stands for Communities Local Energy Action Program. And we basically signed on to support the application that our local community college district had put in for the community college district, for the community, and for the city of Bakersfield. The pilot program was designed to work with energy-stressed communities, and in particular, these are the communities that were selected, and you can see that the communities that are in green are EJ communities, environmental justice communities. Yellow means those are fossil fuel communities, and guess what? We are both. We produce approximately 80% of fuels right here in Kern County. And the city of Bakersfield and most of the census tracts in Kern County are Justice 40 communities, which is a federal designation of disadvantaged. And then there are a variety of other equity indicators that we have used in this project as well. So I saw the question in the chat about what's considered disadvantaged. Well, it depends on what you're applying for and how they define it. Basically, and let me just go straight to it. When we started getting the technical assistance through the LEAP program, we started working with the National Renewable Energy Lab. And the first thing that they did was work with us to create a selection methodology. And this was where, from the very get-go, as a representative of a community-based organization, I said, community is going to be centered, community is going to be centered. And by the way, did I tell you community is going to be centered? Because it wasn't going to be. To be quite candid with you, our area is oil and agriculture and increasingly warehousing as the Inland Empire of California, east of Los Angeles, starts to complete its build out of warehousing. Guess where it's coming? It's coming to Kern County. And in that environment, economically and decision making, we see that the resource curse leads to reduced decision-making functionality. And indeed, we have a lot of issues besides environmental justice issues. So working with the county of Kern, working with other entities can be very challenging. I mean, just to give you an example, the Department of Justice for the state of California released a press release in the last couple of months identifying the results of its investigation that the county of Kern has violated systematically the free speech rights of community-based organizations and community members. So we know that we have a lot of challenges related to decision-making, and working in partnership with folks to get things done for disinvested communities, it can be tricky. So it was very helpful that I did not come from a technical background, because what it took to get this across the finish line was somebody who understood the landscaping. And indeed, the first thing we did was I pulled out all of my equity indicators that I used. Thank you at Catalyst California, formerly known as Advancement Project California. Their Healthy City tool was very helpful. Cal EnviroScreen is a tool we use here in California that combines poverty factors with environmental justice, pollution burden factors, and you can look at heat maps. And then, of course, the Federal Justice 40 tool. Is this community considered disadvantaged or not? And for the most part, when NREL put all of these factors together at our request, no surprise, we came across these three communities in particular. Among, quite honestly, we could have chosen one of 25 or 30 communities in Kern County because they all fit, by any definition, disinvested status. And we ultimately chose these three communities because they were representative of the types of challenges that communities that are disinvested will face with regard to getting this kind of funding and getting it across the finish line and actually having it serve the people it's intended to serve. I'm going to back up just a little bit to share with you. NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, also worked with utilities to get outage data. And that was the other piece of the puzzle that we brought to the table to identify the folks that were not only at the top of the list in terms of pollution burden, hard to count census tract, Justice 40, but also with regard to outages. And not just they have a lot of outages that are short, but some folks see outages that last for days. And indeed, some of our mountain communities, I've been up there when they've experienced 3 days of no cell network at all. I mean, forget about electricity for a second. They didn't have cellular coverage for 3 days straight. So we know that disinvested communities and the infrastructure that's supposed to reach them often doesn't. So we worked with Wasco, which is a farm worker community adjacent to where high-speed rail is being constructed here in the Central Valley. We chose Lamont, another farm worker community to the south that often faces flooding. And then we chose East Bakersfield, which is a formerly redlined community, another data point that I brought to the table through my redistricting and census work, because we wanted to make sure that their voices were centered every step of the way and throughout all of the projects. And we discovered a lot of things that surprised us and a lot of stuff that didn't. Poor power infrastructure, heat waves. A lot of people don't have air conditioning. We have really bad air quality, often ranked #1 in the country worst air quality. Ag and oil is not a good combination for urban heat islands like in East Bakersfield. And we knew that a lot of people just simply can't afford their power bills to begin with. So ultimately, we refined our selection process. We had the equity index to end all equity indices so that our selections would be unassailable. Otherwise, it would have been usurped by some industry partner. And we knew that this was a program for disinvested communities, and we were going to fight for that. And so we built capacity every step of the way. When we had our public workshops, we were teaching people what is resilience. Obviously, everything was in English and Spanish. All of my slides are in English, but if you want them in Spanish, I can provide them in Spanish. We had translation every step of the way, and community members were centered every step of the way, building capacity. What is a hazard? What is a threat? And I really have to thank National Renewable Energy Lab because they were just amazing every step of the way. Finally, we shared with folks what these potential functions might look like in a resilience hub, because that's what they selected. They wanted their community centers to be the first across the finish line to become a microgrid, to become a resilience center. So that the next time we have a heat wave, which it's only going to get hotter, and we lost farm workers last year, we can't let that happen again. We're going to be ready. And it's going to be because the community is driving it. And so we asked them, what do you want? And this is what they told us. Cooling centers, cooling centers, cooling centers, commercial kitchens. A lot of people are starting small businesses. They make food in home kitchens and sell it. Of course, you know, we're supporting people to do it right. And they're using the facilities during normal times of operation just as much as they are available during times of disruption. Capacity building every step of the way. Tool libraries, I thought that was a fantastic thing. Not everybody can afford all those tools. You can come and check one out from the Resilience Center. I thought was great. And finally, where do we go from here? Well, the analysis is going to be produced using REOPT, which is a free tool that you can find online on the NREL website to determine optimization for your solar load, your battery storage, and what kinds of inputs you're going to need. And we're working to leverage additional funding. Some of the stuff that was mentioned by Alex, Bakersfield is a transformational climate community. We're using that to combine with our resilience work with the MLK Community Center. We know that we need to take advantage of those federal grants, but nobody here has ever applied for a federal grant except for a couple people. So we're really mindful of the fact that capacity building along the way is something that we need to fight for. And I'll just say my final piece by saying that these applications require that community be centered and that community engagement plans be included almost all of the time, especially those Department of Energy grants. When you center community members, you're not just doing the right thing, you're helping yourself apply for that funding and be competitive about it.
Lori, thank you so much for that very informative and personally I found to be inspirational presentation. That was really excellent. And we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, particularly relating to where folks can find the information that you referred to, that NREL and you relied on, the National Renewable Energy Labs. So I don't use acronyms. So thank you very much for your presentation and for the work that you do. Really appreciate it. I'm now going to ask my colleague Pamela Martinez to return to us, and Pamela is going to talk a little bit about other funding opportunities that are currently available to the public. So let me, hang on, I have to share my screen. Pamela.
Thank you, Geraldine, and thank you all for the questions. We will have some time to answer them towards the end of the webinar. We'll also try to answer those quick questions in the chat as well. I want to go ahead and jump into 3 funding opportunities in particular. I know there was a question in the chat if we could please specify which funding opportunities are for California and which ones are nationwide. So I'll start off with saying that the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program is a program designed for California, as well as the Equity and Access Grant Program through the California Public Utilities Commission. And then the last funding opportunity that we'll dive deep into, it is a nationwide program. So to start off with, the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program is a program that is currently open. There is technical assistance that is available. However, you must submit a pre-application interest form no later than March 5th to be considered for technical assistance. And the full application is only available once you do submit a pre-application. The pre-application itself is pretty short. For a grant application, it takes you anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes to complete. Pretty straightforward pre-application. Once the folks from the Office of Planning and Research review that pre-application, they will go ahead and confirm that they have received it, and they will send you a link with the full application so that you are able to start working on that application. The full application is due on April 23rd, 2024. The California Public Utilities Equity and Access Grant Program, will dive deeper into this program. Alex touched on it a little bit earlier on, and this grant program covers the Public Participation Grant Account, the Equity Engagement and Education Grant Account, as well as the Clean Energy Access Grant Account. And lastly, the Inflation Reduction Act Community Change Grants Program, technical assistance is available, and the application deadline is November 21st, 2024, and applications are being accepted on a rolling basis. So for those of you that are interested in submitting an application before November 21st, 2024, that is available. Next slide, please. So jumping into the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program, this program will fund planning and implementation projects to mitigate the impacts of extreme heat or the urban heat island effect. The program will build frameworks for change and invest in local, regional, and tribal projects that strengthen communities that are vulnerable to extreme heat. So very similar to the work that Lori was just talking about. This would be a perfect funding opportunity for community-based organizations based in the Central Valley. And this grant is covering planning grants and implementation grants. So planning grants, there is a small grant that will award projects between $100,000 to $250,000. Larger grants between $300,000 to $750,000. And those implementation grants, the smaller grant will vary between $100,000 to $450,000. And the large grant will start at $500,000 and will fund up to projects up to $4 million. I want to note here on the eligible entities, these are not all of the eligible entities, but for the purpose of this webinar, we wanted to focus on community-based organizations and what sort of funding opportunities are currently available for community-based organizations. So some of these eligible entities do include Native American tribes, community-based organizations, cities, counties, school districts. Please note that with every funding opportunity, as I'm seeing more and more, there is the emphasis or the requirement of having a stakeholder structure, which could entail multiple community-based organizations. It could also ask to explain how you will engage community members, how you will engage other stakeholders, such as cities, counties, how you will work with local government. So this is one of the funding opportunities that we really wanted to emphasize is currently open, and make sure that we shared with you all the small and large grants available through this program. Next slide, please. And this program here, Alex, as I mentioned, Alex touched on it a little bit. And this Equity and Access Grant Program is designed to make it possible for the California Public Utilities Commission to honor its commitment to members of environmental and social justice communities by empowering them to participate in California Public Utilities Commission proceedings and decision-making processes, as well as to have more access to investments in clean energy resources, transportation, and communication services. So the public participation grant account will award grants of up to $15,000. The Equity Engagement and Education Grant Account, the second cycle will open May 1st to June 30th of 2024, and the maximum award amount is up to $200,000. And the Clean Energy Access Grant Account will open March 1st and will close on April 30th, and the maximum award amount through this grant is $500,000. So the programs that Alex was talking about, such as the SGIP program and the Microgrid Incentive Program, those all fall under the Clean Energy Access Grant account. Next slide, please.
Oops.
And the Inflation Reduction Act Community Change Grants Program. This program is, as I mentioned, nationwide. So this program will support community-driven projects that build capacity for communities to tackle environmental and climate justice challenges, strengthen their climate resilience, and advance clean energy. As I mentioned before, technical assistance is available. And as you will see here in the slide deck, which of course we will share out, we have hyperlinked to the web pages so that you can quickly access what we're referencing. So the technical assistance page will be available to you that you can access after the webinar. The application deadline again is November 21st, 2024, and applications are being accepted on a rolling basis. One of the items that we notice and that could discourage folks is potentially the cost share. For this program, there is no cost share that is required. So I want to just really make sure that we're emphasizing no cost share is required for this program. There are two different tracks of funding. Track 1 funding will fund projects between $10 million and $20 million. Track 2 funding will fund projects between $1 million and $3 million. Again, the eligible entities, because it is a long list, we want to make sure that we're putting the emphasis in community-based organizations for the purpose of this webinar. But if you would like to see the entire list of eligible entities and some of the exceptions, it is already hyperlinked here in this slide deck. So eligible entities for this project is a partnership between 2 community-based organizations, or a partnership between one community-based organization and one of the following, either a federally recognized tribe, a local government, or an institution of higher education. And of course, if you have any questions about these programs or any of the information that we've covered on these funding opportunities, we'll talk a little bit more on how you can stay connected with the Climate Center and how the Climate Center is currently supporting community-based organizations to access these funds. I think another one of the very important components that Lori mentioned is that a lot of community-based organizations have never applied for a federal grant or such a large grant that has so many requirements and is very intensive. So through our Community Energy Resilience Initiative, we are trying to mitigate some of those challenges. And part of the work that I do on a daily basis is work with community-based organizations and help them leverage these funds by providing overviews such as the one that I just provided and brainstorming with them, as well as a few additional technical assistance resources. So I will go ahead and stop there and pass it back to you, Geraldine.
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you for sharing those resources. We've mentioned it in the chat, and Pamela mentioned it. After this webinar is complete, we will be processing it and getting it ready to post on the website. So the webinar will be on the website along with all of the slides that you're seeing today. So you don't have to worry about it. There will be a link sent to you if you registered for the webinar, which you did because you're here. And you'll be able to access both the recording of the webinar if you want to share it with others, as well as the resources that are located in the different slideshows that you've seen. And now we'll bring up our last speaker, Lauren Halili. Are you there? There you are. And last but definitely not least, and I want to thank you for being here, Lauren, and sharing your information with our folks. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, Geraldine, thank you so much for the introduction. It's really great to be here and to talk to you all about the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice. The acronym for that is CCEEJ, and we just call that CJ since, that is a mouthful of an acronym. My name is Lauren Halili. I'm one of the program managers at this new Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. We opened our doors to technical assistance requests from communities in late September. So really excited to go through our structure of our center and how you can request technical assistance from us to support your energy justice projects. So just a little bit of background on kind of the structure of the program, where we fit into the larger EPA organization. We are funded under EPA's Environmental and Climate Justice Communities Grant Program. This is a new holistic grant and technical assistance program that really focuses on meeting communities at their needs and propelling them towards implementing solutions in their communities. So you can kind of see on the screen, the program is organized into 4 different categories that are focused on the different stages of the EPA's outlined process. And this is to help communities implement solutions, which includes assistance, planning and project development, pilots and partnership, and finally implementation. And so CJ is actually part of the assistance stage of this process, known as the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. For short, we also call that TICTACs. So that's a fun little acronym. And so TICTACs actually serve as the foundation of this program. They're really the front door for communities to seek assistance, building capacity, and access funding opportunities in order to get them towards the next form of assistance. And so being one of 2 TICTACs located in EPA's Region 9, we're hosted at San Diego State University, and we provide direct technical assistance to support underserved and underrepresented communities to help them build capacity and work towards implementing environmental and energy justice solutions in their community. A little bit more background on our structure. So the TICTAC program is part of the Federal Interagency Thriving Communities Network, and we deliver on the Justice 40 initiative to ensure that 40% of those benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities. And so these new technical assistance centers really help to ensure communities with those environmental justice and energy justice concerns can access funding to address generational disinvestment. And so the EPA has selected 16 environmental justice TICTACs in partnership with the Department of Energy. So we are EPA and DOE funded. They've received $177 million to help underserved and overburdened communities across the country. Each TICTAC received at least $10 million over the course of 5 years to assist in removing these barriers and improving accessibility for communities with these concerns. And so you can kind of see a map on the screen, all the TICTACs that were awarded across the nation. So I know that there are some folks that might be outside of Region 9. I see some folks that were on the East Coast. You all have a technical assistance center in your region as well. But we're located in EPA Region 9. So that means we serve American Samoa, Arizona, California, Guam, Hawaii, Northern Mariana Islands, and Nevada. We're one of the few regions that actually have 2 TICTACs in our region. So I just want to shout out our other sister TICTAC. It's the West EJ Center at the University of Arizona. I've put their contact information on the screen as well. A lot of folks ask us, what is the difference between the 2? Like, who do I go to versus, SDSU or U of A? I would say that SDSU, we focus mainly on energy justice and environmental justice. We have specific expertise in our partnerships in that regard. U of A has a particular expertise in public health, but we coordinate with each other on a monthly basis, just so we know, who's coming through our doors, if there's any duplicate requests coming to each TICTAC, and we coordinate on that front. Our center uses a hub and spoke model. So we create a nexus of centralized expertise and coordination for each critical service for Region 9. This really helps connect us eligible organizations with established partners in each state and territory to coordinate, deliver, and monitor uptake of key services while tracking outcomes and outputs from the communities that we serve. So you can kind of see on this bubble map, these are our partners in the hub and spoke model, where San Diego State University is the hub. We have a list of partners around in each of the states and territories in Region 9, a couple nationwide partners as well, like Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals and the Environmental Protection Network. I won't go through all of these, but for the sake of time, but yeah, these are our list of partners. So you might be wondering who is actually eligible to request technical assistance from the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice. It's really all of these organizations here, all the way from nonprofits to philanthropic and civic organizations to U.S. territories, local and state governments, tribal nations, and other tribal organizations. It's a very broad eligibility. I would say the only two organization types that would be ineligible for technical assistance are for-profit entities, and then also 501c4 advocacy groups. Those are the only two that are ineligible to request technical assistance from a TICTAC. So now going into services that we can offer as technical assistance from CJ. These are for community organizations wanting to receive technical assistance. These services include environmental and energy justice needs and assessments and analysis. I know there was some talk in the previous presentation about those environmental screening tools. We're developing trainings on how to use those environmental screening tools, both for Cal EnviroScreen, for EJ Screen, for a DOE energy justice mapping tool. That's definitely in the works on our end. We want to help increase grant getting capacity overall. So we are looking to identify grant opportunities for each organization that comes through our door. We want to be able to create a curated list of funding opportunities that's not only relevant to the organization, but ones that they're also competitive for. So I know Pamela talked about the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Grant Program. When that came across our desk, we went through our list of organizations that we've met with so far and saw who would be a really good fit for that grant opportunity. We've set up meetings with them to kind of go over the grant opportunity and just offered support wherever they need it, because I know that opportunity specifically has their own technical assistance, so they would be the expert in that regard, but just making sure that our organizations are aware of opportunities that come their way. We also support decision-making participation, train community leaders. We're having a grant writing training and development in partnership with Writing for Green. We also do translation and interpretation services, knowledge of relevant laws, regulations, policies, and then specific technical expertise in the energy justice and environmental justice sector, as well as connecting with a network of partners. Requesting technical assistance from us is really easy. You can go to our website, cj.sdsu.edu, scroll down on the page, and you can click the Request Technical Assistance button. It's also a QR code on the screen. If you wish to not, it'll take you to a Google form that you can fill out, and a team member will reach out to you to set up a one-on-one meeting. You can also email us directly or call us by phone if you want to set up a meeting that way. Really encourage everyone to sign up for our mailing list. We're in the development of quite a few community events, and that will be coming throughout the entire grant. So this is a great way to stay up to date. We release a quarterly newsletter, as well as maybe any updates that we have, community events that we're doing. So yeah, that is right next to the Request Technical Assistance button, as well as a QR code on the screen. And then speaking of upcoming events, we actually have a webinar next Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. This is our energy justice webinar. They're going to be kind of talking about what energy justice is, and they're also going to even introduce several grant opportunities that are currently available in the energy justice sector, and then how CJ can actually help with those. And then here's all our contact information. Up there's our website, we have our phone number, we have our direct email line. Like I said, if you didn't want to use the Google form to request technical assistance from us, feel free to shoot us an email or leave a voice message on our number, and a team member will get back to you and set up a one-on-one 30-minute meeting. That 30-minute meeting we do with all of our people who request technical assistance from us. That is just so we can get a more detailed understanding of what it is your organization is looking for and what it is that we can assist with. And all of our socials are there too, as well as just leaving a QR code up there for our newsletter. And then with that being said, I'll pass it back off to the Climate Center team. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lauren. That was wonderful. And I learned a lot that I didn't know before. So thank you for sharing all your expertise. I believe Pamela has some information she wants to share about a Google form that we want to share.
Thank you, Jarlyn, and thank you, Lauren. It has been great to hear about all of the work that our speakers are doing. And as I mentioned before, the Climate Center works very closely with Lauren as well, very similar to the work that they're doing. I'm going to go ahead, and I believe Rob may have already dropped it in the chat here, but share with you how the Climate Center can support community-based organizations leverage these state and federal funds. So if you are interested in finding an opportunity to pursue a clean energy project, you may be in the same boat that Lori was in 2 years ago, where you have very little knowledge about community energy resilience and don't necessarily know where to start with all of the notice of funding opportunities. There's just a lot of information that is out there. We are very aware of that. So we want to make sure that we are doing our part in helping facilitate this entire process for community-based organizations. And if you are interested in exploring the opportunity to enhance community resilience in your area, go ahead and fill out the Google form that has been dropped in the chat. We'll ask you for your first name, last name, organization, and part of the work that I'll be doing after the webinar is following up with those who complete the Google form and taking additional time to sit down one-on-one and talk about what are your organizational goals on building community resilience in your community, and how can the Climate Center support. So I will go ahead and give folks a moment to access the Google form. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. I'll be sharing my contact information as well. And I will pass it over to you, Jarlyn.
Great. Thank you so much, Pamela. And thanks to all of our speakers for staying within their time frame, because now we have a healthy half hour to address all the questions that came up during your presentations. So if folks could come back on screen so we could see your lovely faces. There's one question that's sort of general, but I thought it would be a good one to ask for all of you, which is, what advice would you give to organizations who are interested in pursuing clean energy projects but don't know where to start? Would anyone like to take that on?
Yeah, I'm happy to take
You
a
can go
first,
first, Alex.
a first shot of it. Thanks, Lauren. I mean, it really depends on the type of project you're looking to develop. I think that's identifying what type of project you want to develop. And like I mentioned throughout my presentation, there are a lot of funding opportunities available that might drive that decision of what type of kind of community serving project you would want to develop. And there's rebate programs available, whether for multifamily affordable housing or the single family program that I mentioned. So yeah, it's almost too much information that's out there. I would offer my services and GRID's experience if you want to reach out directly. Happy to kind of talk through your options and talk through the more technical details of the project you're hoping to work on.
Thank you, Alex. And then Lauren, I know you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, I just wanted to plug in. Reach out if you're in Region 9, those states and territories that I mentioned, definitely reach out to the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice. We can put you in contact with our partners that specifically focus on the energy justice side of our work, and they can help identify or kind of give a little bit of one-on-one advising on what sort of projects that you're interested in doing. Or if you're not in Region 9, still you can feel free to reach out to us. We can help you identify the TICTEC that's in your region.
Perfect. Thank you. That's actually what I would say, is that we learned today that both Pamela and Lauren, what they do is offer technical assistance to folks who are seeking it. So if you're looking for a place to start, you could contact them and they could probably give you a head in the right direction. So thank you for that question. There are many, many other questions. One question for Alex was, what is the biggest challenge you had to overcome to pursue funding for a resilience project?
Yeah, well, kind of before all of the funding sources that I went over, there really wasn't anything. So we really relied on philanthropic sources. Our grant writing team applied, and it's kind of a common path of funding these types of projects. Philanthropic sources and those types of grants fill the gap until, especially in California. And sorry, my presentation was so California centric. Until the state kind of fills that gap and creates funding sources that I mentioned. So now we're at a place that a lot of these projects can be funded in full, like I mentioned, solar and storage projects through either state rebates or federal tax incentives. So yeah, very, very, very exciting time. And well, before we were really dependent on reaching out to folks and seeing who might be willing to fund it. There's seems to be a consistent, concerted effort to fund these types of projects now.
Thank you, Alex. And Lori?
Yeah, one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is good old-fashioned reaching out to your elected representative, because the first thing I ever did, kind of even remotely close to this work, was we had a lot of families in the Fresno area, farm worker families, who were targeted by unscrupulous contractors, and some of them lost their homes. And so what we did was from the grassroots level, we approached our state assembly people and senators who we knew would probably support legislation for consumer protection. And we even got a restitution fund, which I'm happy to report I checked yesterday. It has helped at least a dozen families in the zip codes where we were hoping to help farm worker families be able to keep their homes. Now, that was run through the Contractor State Licensing Board and our state Department of Financial and Protection Innovation. It doesn't exist anymore in that form, but that doesn't mean there isn't some opportunity for budget dust in other gap areas like that. You just have to ask sometimes.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, especially local officials who know the communities as well as they do. Lori, I had a sort of a follow-up question to that for you, which is what were some of the challenges that you encountered when engaging community members about resilience in the Central Valley of California?
I think the biggest challenge is, especially since I come from a background as a public defender, we have a huge population of system impacted, justice involved folks. And when you come to folks with something that is seems like it's out of left field, they're going to be like, what's this about? I don't believe it. Y'all have come to my neighborhood and said these things before, and it didn't amount to anything. So, I mean, it can be really challenging to spark a flame of hope, especially like electric vehicle programs that have tried coming through here in Bakersfield in particular. Where are the EVs? Like, you can ask anybody in our community in the east side of Highway 99, raise your hand if you have an electric vehicle, and no hand is going to go up, right? Raise your hand if you have solar panels, and some hands might go up, but they're going to have a horror story for you. So what it really required was finding those community champions who are seeing the vision of resilience and willing to stand with you to fight for it to be community-centered. And then the role of trusted messenger organizations is critical. If you don't have trusted messenger organizations who are out there knocking on doors, forget it. It is not going to work. And sometimes with the federal funding in particular, you got to fight for that, because they're not going to let you use anything but a vetted list of outreach providers, which LEAP required us to do that. And we had to find good individuals at NREL. We had to find good individuals in the outreach, and we had to find good individuals on the ground to do the real grassroots work to make it work for real people. And then you get the buy-in, then you get the vision and the achievement.
Thank you, Lori. That's really helpful for folks who want to help, who want to figure out how they can reach out to their local communities and be of use to disadvantaged communities and community-based organizations. Lauren, we had an interesting question come up for the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice, or CEJ, which is folks are wondering if your organization provides direct funding for their projects, for their planning, if you actually are a provider of funds?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a good question. That's one we get asked a lot. We are not a provider of funds. We're not a grant maker by any means. We are focused on improving accessibility of funding to organizations. So unfortunately, we don't provide funds. I guess I will throw in there also that this is another frequently asked questions. If people ask if we actually do the pen to paper grant writing, unfortunately, we're unable to do actual pen to paper grant writing for organizations, but other support that we can provide is grant writing training, which we're planning to do a really comprehensive one that's in development, templates, white papers, webinars, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to address that question in the same one.
Thank you. That's helpful. Sort of a follow-up for you, but anyone can answer it. One of the questions that was asked was, what is a disadvantaged business? And how does that differ from a for-profit entity that may not have access to these technical assistance and those types of services? Anyone? Because I think one of the categories that came up was disadvantaged business. And I think there's some lack of clarity as to what that means. If nobody knows, that's fine.
I might have to get back on that. I know that was discussed on my team before, but I can't remember what our communications with that is. So let me get back.
Yeah, and I haven't heard that term. There's definitely benefits to being minority-owned business and women-owned business, Section 3 business and things like that, especially when applying for public funds. So maybe that's what that means.
I know California also recognizes LGBTQ businesses as well, but my friends who have high-speed rail contracts have told me that in a lot of funding opportunities, it's a distinction without a difference sometimes. So I guess it depends on how it's applied. I look forward to seeing Lauren's response.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for all of us because it's a term that I've heard before, but I didn't know what its definition was either. One question that's come up that I thought was interesting to pose to you, because we have a lot of different resources as it relates to how do we define disadvantaged communities for purpose of these grants. And I know there are different answers if it's federal or if it's state, but Robert Perry asked, are there any efforts currently underway to create a universal broad spectrum questionnaire that helps communities identify their needs and then connect them to eligible programs? And I thought the three of you might know if such an effort was underway.
Not that I am aware of, but it does sound like a great idea. I know in the past we've also heard about potentially a universal sort of application that facilitates the entire grant process for community-based organizations that are smaller, and that wouldn't require as much time for these community-based organizations to spend preparing a grant proposal before even being sure if they would be awarded those funds. So it definitely sounds like a great idea that could potentially facilitate the process for community-based organizations, but I'm not aware of anything at this moment. It looks like, well, for the grant opportunities that I've reviewed and that I've seen, a lot of them do use CalEnviro screening. And in addition to that, there's additional tools that are provided within the grant itself that you could use to show a census tract or low-income communities. And of course, it really just depends on the grant itself, if it's state-based or if it's nationwide.
Because nationwide, I saw in the chat, somebody referred to an environmental justice database, or is it EJ40? Lori, you put something in the chat?
No, there were lots of better educated, well-informed folks than me who put it in the chat. But so I would definitely save the chat for those links. But I know when I had an opportunity to speak to some folks who do this kind of work on the federal level, what they were working on was not like a comprehensive tool for folks to go on and be like, here are the opportunities. This is my organization kind of thing. It sounds like that's what Lauren and Alex and Pamela can work with, can support with. But I do know that like contextualizing everything within this landscape that we're in of the funding coming from federal sources and the federal government ultimately being a function of whichever administration happens to be in power at the time. I think it is important to remember that equity indicators and pollution burden and these indices that we're using, that they not be race-based, because we don't want funding awards to be jeopardized in any way. And so I think that the tool that is being created and that clearly has been created at the federal level and certainly at the state level, at least in California, and any other kinds of equity indicators like the ones I showed, the ones that talk about access to water, access to transportation, hard to count census tracts, the Justice 40, which is the federal designation. I think that when you use those kinds of EJ-oriented equity data points, it's extraordinarily unassailable. And then you know that you're not running into issues of an administration change jeopardizing the ability to access funds.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification and that information. I think it's very useful. So we're getting a lot of questions about how to define disadvantaged communities, how to define at-risk communities. And I think not making it race-based is very important to not get into issues of equal opportunity or legal morass. One of the questions that's been asked a couple of times in different ways was relating to the requirement in some grants that say that you must use a prevailing wage. And I know that one of our labor experts at the Climate Center, Mark Victoria, answered that in the chat. But I wondered if any of you wanted to address that question about how do you define prevailing wage? What does it mean? And then how do you prevent perhaps an additional cost as it relates to prevailing wage not interfere with your funding?
So I could speak to that a bit. We do a number of prevailing wage jobs, whether they're public projects or new construction affordable housing that leverages state funding. Just for context, for at least the solar component, we're looking at rates for commercial projects, so either multifamily buildings that are 4 stories or above, or just commercial community serving new construction projects. Requiring about $95 to $100 per hour. So it's a fairly significant jump in hourly rates. And obviously that has a fairly significant impact on the cost of the project overall. Unfortunately, there's not really a funding strategy behind it other than, as I mentioned, trying to develop projects that qualify for those 30% adders that I mentioned as part of the investment tax credit program. A lot of those are location based, so trying to develop projects that land within those criteria, and just being honest in kind of, if it's grant based, making sure that you're reflecting the additional cost in kind of your budgeting for the number of grants that I went over.
And is prevailing wage something that is established by the local unions?
So and I'm in no way an expert on this, but I know there's the Davis-Bacon Act, which set statewide, and again, I'm very California centric, that set kind of the statewide prevailing wage rates per each trade. I'm not sure about the federal level.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification and that explanation. Also, we have a response from Lauren about how you define a disadvantaged business. So Lauren, did you want to say out loud what you put in the chat for the group?
Yeah, so it would be, so within our eligibility for requesting technical assistance, it would be those who are certified as a disadvantaged business enterprise, or a DBE. And I dropped that definition in the chat. That's actually from the Department of Energy. So apologies that took long to find. I just wanted to confirm with my colleague to make sure that was the correct information.
Thank you. So that's the answer, Lori, that we were looking for. It's set by the Department of Energy. So it's a federal designation. And that's how it's differentiated from other for-profit entities, is that it has that classification that's received on a federal level. Okay, so I think you answered this in the chat, Laura, Alex, but someone was asking what the adders are in your funding sources slide. And if you could let us know what an adder is for those of us who
let me pull that up. So the exciting thing about the new investment tax credit that was bolstered by the Inflation Reduction Act was, one, it returned kind of the base level investment tax credit to 30%. And that's the base, that's the minimum of what you would get. And then there's these adders that are location based or beneficiary based, that if your project is located in a specific area or community, we kind of reviewed the EPA's EJ tool and map, or defined as a low income community, you can add those up to 60% ITC. So that's really a 60% reduction in the cost of the system that you'd be installing. And again, what was exciting about this new round of investment tax credit is that for nonprofits like Grid or government entities, you don't need to have a tax appetite to be able to take advantage of that tax credit. There is a direct payment provision that would allow for the direct payment equal value to be paid out to that entity. I'm trying to pull up the Q&A because I had a more detailed answer to what each of those adders were, but really it's a 10% adder if you're in what's defined as an energy community. That's guaranteed as well. There's also some competitive adders, including a 10% adder if you are in a low income community, a 20% adder if your system benefits low income customers. So we see this often with virtually net metered multifamily projects in the affordable housing space. Those two, that 30% cluster, is competitive and is not guaranteed. There's also a 10% adder for domestic procurement. If a certain percentage of your equipment is manufactured in the US, then you can qualify for that 10%. So those being stacked upon one another could go up to 70% investment tax credit.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I know that was a question that I was curious about, and so I appreciate your response. Loretta Lynch has put into the chat that the prevailing wage rates are set by the Department of Industrial Relations in a very set process that takes into account the wages county by county. They publish rates by county that must be followed. And this is for California, the California Department of Industrial Relations. So just in case you're not monitoring the chat, I wanted to read that out loud because we did have a question relating to that. And I wanted to make sure everybody heard the response of where the prevailing wage comes from. I think I asked that question. So another question that's come up, and this is for anyone who might know the answer, is the EPA Inflation Reduction Act Community Grants Program Track 1 support a water resiliency grid? Basically enable resiliency to drought threat in California for rural agricultural and tribal communities in Northern California. So essentially we're asking if resiliency is only defined with respect to energy and clean air, in terms of energy being generated and by solar and stored on site. Is there a water resiliency aspect to the program that could be taken advantage of?
There is a water component. I don't have the details of it though.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same exact thing, Alex. I can definitely take a look, and if the person who asked the question can follow up, or if we have their contact information, I'm more than happy to follow up as well. Lauren?
Yeah, I just want to, the IRA Community Change Grants, technical assistance folks, they host a webinar every Tuesday. I'm forgetting the time. I think it's like 3 p.m. Eastern time. So that might be also a good way to get answers to your question there too.
So Bruce Webster, I don't know if you're still on the webinar, but if you are, please follow up with us, and hopefully you'll be able to get more information on that issue of water resiliency, because I think that's an interesting one. And Lori just put in the chat ways that folks can sign up for the EPA webinars. Okay, I'm just scrolling through our questions, just going there's a question about for Lori about warehousing in Kern County. And the question essentially is asking, is warehousing taking over economic development in the Central Valley, the way that it has in some ways in Riverside and San Bernardino counties? Is warehousing becoming a huge source of economic development?
It is, and it's because like some of the analyses of the labor costs between Kern County and the Inland Empire register significant labor cost savings to locate in Kern County. And Kern County leadership has made it very, very, very clear that they will roll out the red carpet for folks wanting to develop a warehouse. And in fact, a number of different warehouses in the north side of Bakersfield, they're just building them on spec without having even somebody lined up to purchase it, because they know that it's gonna sell or it's gonna lease. And indeed, there's one that they have approved right there in the city of Bakersfield, surrounded by one of the most populated areas in the city along Highway 99, near a bunch of schools, and where they've already had traffic accidents that have hurt school children in that area, even without a 1 million-square-foot warehouse being built there. So we're facing a lot of challenges related to this, because the county is very uncomfortable about losing oil jobs and oil tax revenues. They're more than willing to roll out the red carpet for warehousing, and it's happening. And they're even doing annexations to make it go even faster.
Wow.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you, Lori. That's interesting development that I was not aware of. So Kenneth Wells asked a question, which is, if a for-profit company is doing the same work as community-based organizations or some nonprofits, do they have any options to qualify for these funds? I don't know if they are classified as a disadvantaged business, and I think Kenneth is off the webinar now, but I thought I would still answer the question in case he follows up. Lauren, you have your hand up, but I don't know if that's from before.
That is from before. I will figure out how to put it down. Sorry.
You just press it again. So I don't know that for-profit entities are the target for these types of funding. So I apologize to Kenneth for not knowing the answer to that question. Another question that's come up is, how do people in the community find out about public participation opportunities?
I can jump into that one. In particular, for the public participation grant through the California Public Utilities. So folks have to be invited to be part of one of those events by the California Public Utilities staff. And that is the only way to receive that type of funding. So my recommendation would be, if you are interested in participating in one of those events, to sign up for their events and their newsletter. I hope that can answer your question.
I'm also wondering, and thank you for that, Pamela, I appreciate your response. I'm also wondering, like in the case of Lori and Alex, who are doing, direct services to communities in disadvantaged parts of the both Southern California and the Central Valley. How do you reach out to folks to help them understand that a community workshop is coming up, or that there's a community meeting where there's going to be, I don't know if you call it a design charrette, but there's going to be a brainstorm about what folks want to see out of a resilience center? How do you get the word out to folks in a very practical way?
Yeah, so especially while we're in this kind of ramping up phase of funding just starting to get out there and the opportunities just starting to saturate, it really does need to get filtered through trusted messenger organizations. And so I'm really grateful to folks like the California Endowment who have been funding, building healthy communities tables in the Central Valley and in California, looking for those trusted messenger organizations and funding them, fund them to do the outreach, because they know the people, and especially those that work closely and provide direct services to subpopulations that are particularly hard to reach. I mean, pay them to do the work. Community-based organizations are constantly asked to do things that are unfunded, and we're missing a huge amount of potential to reach people, because they don't just reach people once. Like, they're knocking on doors again and again. And in California in particular, there's an inclusive economic development program called California Jobs First, of which there are 13 regions in the state. They have to include community. We have huge public meetings to talk to people about inclusive economic development and climate resilience. And once you get plugged in, it's like once you find a vein, like, there you go, you're in it. Once you find those CBOs, those local organizations that are doing this work, you can literally, no pun intended, get plugged in, and then you will get the mailing list, you'll get the notifications, and get involved. The opportunities will become available. You just have to start showing up and saying yes, kind of like I did 2 years ago, and just said, yes, I'll go to that meeting.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate your insight. And I think that was the end of our Q&A session. And I apologize, I didn't amplify and say this is our last question. But I want to thank our speakers for their time, for their presentations, and for their willingness to sort of take questions that came up during their presentations and during our chat this morning. I know that Pamela has a call to action for us, which is, how do we take all this information and actually do something with it? Or is there something we can do immediately that can help us gain access to these resources that are available both now at the state and at the federal level in unprecedented ways? Pamela?
Thank you, Geraldine. Yes, very much related to all of the information we just reviewed here on upcoming funding opportunities and how to stay connected and how to find out about these sorts of events that are happening within our community. What we have designed at the Climate Center is an opportunity to sign up for updates. We publish a funding opportunity blog every about 3 months, where we give a list of upcoming funding opportunities, very similar to the breakdown that I reviewed, but in a chart form. So as of now, we have published 2 upcoming funding opportunity blogs, one in September of 2023 and the other in December of 2023. The next one will come out in March 2024. And we really want to make sure that we're emphasizing the importance of signing up through this Google form that Rob has shared in the chat. If you haven't already signed up, please go ahead and complete it. That's a great way to stay informed of upcoming funding opportunities. I am connecting again with community-based organizations, providing this information, providing this technical assistance. As we know, the different grant guidelines can vary between 50, 60, 70, even 90 plus pages, and we understand the limited capacity that community-based organizations have. So we want to make sure that we're supporting community-based organizations by providing an overview and plan, sitting down with them and letting them know what sort of funding opportunities they can leverage, what sort of projects can be funded to continue to advance these clean energy projects and advancing community resilience while prioritizing disadvantaged communities and frontline communities. So if you haven't already completed the Google form, we ask that you go ahead and complete it and stay in touch with the Climate Center. We have upcoming webinars, as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, and I will pass it back to you, Geraldine, to close us out.
Thank you. I want to give a final thanks to all of our speakers, Alex, Lori, Lauren, and Pamela. Also behind the scenes, Rob, Stacy, and Mark. We're helping with management of the questions and answers, and also answering some of the questions that came up in the chat. Really appreciate all of you who attended today. Thank you for being here. We will be sending out a notice when we have posted the recording of the webinar on our website, and you will be getting also copies of the different slide presentations. So look for those in your inbox. Thank you for being here, and I will give you back 1 full minute of your day to take a breath and maybe get some more coffee. So thank you all for being here, and appreciate you, and hope you can join us again next time or at our policy summit next month in Sacramento. Thank you.